Boxy, we have company. We have guests. Yes, no, we do. Hello, everybody. I'm Larry Harnish, and this is Boxy. Boxy is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. I do an Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Now, in case you're new, I do the Ask Me Anythings. Hey, Spence. In case you know, I do the Ask Me Anythings because I got tired of the low quality of true crime TV shows and podcasts. This is only Black Dahlia questions. I got so many George Hodel questions that I had to start another Ask Me Anything on George Hodel and Steve Hodel. That's the third Tuesday of the month. In this case, that will be March 19th. So today, only Dahlia questions, no George Hodel questions. And I have to say, I've got a lot of questions. This is going to be a fun session. Instagram cuts off at an hour, and the time will go fast. Now, I usually get a troll, so don't be shy about reporting them. I'll report them as well. I do not tolerate any harassment. Hey, Joyce, or hey, Sheila. Now, the way this works is I alternate between live questions in the chat and submitted questions. I've got some via email, some via Instagram, some by YouTube. So I have questions from all over the place, and they're good questions. These are particularly good questions this week, and I'm really looking forward to this session. The next Dahlia session, mark your calendar, is April 2nd. YouTube and Instagram, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Mark your calendar. Okay. Report on the book. Now, I got a question the other day. Are you writing a book on the Black Dahlia case? It's like, yeah. That's why I have every video starts with a report on the book. As of Friday, I have 145,000 words. I finished part one. That's the life of Elizabeth Short. That is done. It ends with her at the Biltmore. Right now, I'm opening part two, and that is the murder investigation. And I'm opening with the treatment of the Norton Avenue neighborhood. I went back and wrote up my interview with Betty and John Bersinger, which was really interesting. It was really fun. John, of course, is gone now, but it was really a fun interview. It was a really interesting interview, and I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. So I just finished that, and now I'm talking about the Norton Avenue neighborhood as it was in 1947. So today I'm going to talk about, because I get this question all the time, it is a perennial, how did Elizabeth Short get the Black Dahlia nickname? You will see very often that the newspapers nicknamed the case. It's even in the LAPD summary that she was never known as the Black Dahlia. That was the newspapers. No. A little background. The newspapers in Los Angeles in that time period liked to nickname famous murder cases, or they made them famous by using the nicknames. There were a lot of floral nicknames, and the paper that usually did this was the evening paper. It was the Herald Express. Hey, Lady Tyler. It was the Herald Express, which later became the Herald Examiner, took a special pride in nicknaming murder cases, and that continued all the way up to the Night Stalker, the Hillside Strangler. Those were all from the Herald Express. The Los Angeles Times never engaged in that kind of thing. So what you have in the time period of the 30s and 40s is you have a whole lot of floral names. For some reason, they liked floral names. You had the red hibiscus murder. You had the white gardenia murder. There was something like a yellow flame, something like that. But general, and of course, Sleepy Lagoon. Sleepy Lagoon may be one of the famous nicknamed cases. So the newspaper, the Herald Express, if you go back and look at the original news coverage from 1947, you will see that they tried to nickname the case. They called it the werewolf murder. And you will, if you go through, it was kind of fun to go through the old copies of the Herald Express, because they had tried that on another another murder. They tried to call another murder the werewolf murder. And then when Elizabeth Short was killed, they tried that again. What happened was, and it's interesting to see how the Herald Express kind of hung on to the werewolf murder nickname, even after the Black Dahlia nickname had been known, had been discovered. The Herald, and for a while, the Herald Express would use both. They'd say the Black Dahlia, then they call it the werewolf. Here's what happened. Elizabeth Short, in the summer of 1946, came out to Long Beach. And she was living and the building is still there. It was like a hotel apartment building. And she was living there. And there was a corner drugstore up the street. And so she would go to this corner drugstore, is up the street, and there was a soda fountain there, a lunch counter. And the soda fountain lunch counter, that was kind of one of her comfort zones. It wasn't bars, it wasn't cocktail lounges. She liked to hang out at lunch counters and soda fountains. That was kind of her milieu. Anyway, she was hanging out at the lunch counter at this drugstore in Long Beach. And at the time, the Alan Ladd, Veronica Lake movie, The Blue Dahlia, was playing in Long Beach. And so someone in that drugstore made a comment about how they should call Elizabeth Short the Black Dahlia. That's as far as it went. She was called the Black Dahlia in the drugstore, but it never went beyond that. It is not like if you watch the Lucy Arnaz TV movie where she says, "They call me the Black Dahlia." No, that never happened. That's sort of painfully inaccurate. Anyway, she got that nickname in the drugstore. After she was killed, the newspapers got a hold of that nickname. And there's a lot of competition about which reporter got that nickname first. If you go back through the newspapers, you will see that the nickname appears in pretty much all of the newspapers the same day. I forget which day it was, but all the same day. Jack Smith, famous columnist in later years at the Los Angeles Times, he was a rewrite guy at the Daily News. And rewrite guys, the way reporting was done in those days was you would have somebody who would go out in the field and they would take notes and they would call up the rewrite desk and they would say, "Hey, it's a fire. The police say this," and you would have a guy with a headset on the rewrite desk, and they would take all of this stuff that was phoned in and turn it into a story. And that's what Jack Smith did. If you're familiar with a famous sports columnist named Jim Murray, he was also a rewrite guy at the Examiner. That's what he did. He was a rewrite guy at the Examiner. He did the same thing. It was, by the time I got into the news business, that was a lost art. Reporters would go out and get their news and their notes and come back and then write up the story. Anyway, Jack Smith called the drugstore to get some information, and he talks to the druggist who says, "Oh yeah, she was called the Black Dahlia." So Jack Smith gets it. Aggie Underwood got it the same day, apparently from the police. I forget now the exact story, but I think she got it either from the LAPD or the Long Beach police. And the third contender was Bevo Means. And of course, Bevo is kind of the butt of a lot of jokes. Bevo was at the Herald Express, and his main claim to fame was he had been around for a long time. He was an alcoholic. And his nickname, his real name was Beverly Lafayette Means. And he got this nickname Bevo because Bevo was near beer made by Anheuser-Busch. And the joke was that Bevo was always near beer. And so that's how he got the nickname Bevo. Anyway, so you have these three people, Jack Smith, Aggie Underwood, and Bevo Means, all learning the nickname on the same day. And so it took off and it became much more popular. Again, the Herald Express continued to try to, call it the werewolf murder for a couple of days, and they finally said, okay, we're going to go with Black Dahlia. But that's where the nickname comes from. You will hear that it's from her clothes, or she only wore black. There's a lot of goofy stuff like that. It was just a joke at this drugstore lunch counter, and that was it. So that's where the nickname came from. The other thing I want to talk about before I open it up to questions is this. There's a lot of bizarre, strange stuff that goes on around the Black Dahlia case. I try to kind of keep up to date on it just to see what's going on. But I learned about this guy. And if you follow the Black Dahlia, like sort of the Black Dahlia mystique, if you follow it all, you will know that there are people on eBay who sell portraits of Elizabeth Short done in human blood. Yes, if you didn't know that, now you do. Yes, there are people on eBay selling portraits of Elizabeth Short done in human blood. Fine. Let's take that up a notch. There is a guy, his name he goes by Ryan Almighty. And I think he did this a few years ago. I just learned about it. And I'm like jaw on the floor. What he did was he went to Elizabeth Short's grave in Oakland and had someone donate blood that he drew at Elizabeth Short's grave, and then used that blood that he drew at Elizabeth Short's grave to do a portrait of Elizabeth Short, with her face all slashed, and then another one of her, like the sort of the famous, not the mugshot, but the sort of the famous portrait. And you got to be kidding. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. No, it is a thing. There is a guy who did that. The originals sell for $1,000. You can get a postcard version of this thing for $5. And I have to say, what is wrong with people? I don't know if that's to establish sort of edgy outsider credentials. I mean, the guy who does it is pretty out there, as you can imagine. As I said, his name he goes by Ryan Almighty. You could Google him if you want to. He does lots of portraits in human blood. He is the blood spatter artist. But drawing blood at Elizabeth Short's grave. I mean, a lot of weird things happen at Elizabeth Short's grave. But I mean, really, folks, just don't do that. Don't. Yeah. Just try. Anyway. That's my rant on that. But honest to goodness, the Black Dahlia case really inspires some bizarre stuff. Okay, Tyler Bio Rodriguez says, I have a simple question. Where did the myth Elizabeth Short had the middle name Anne come from? It feels like that came from absolutely nowhere one day. Yes. In fact, it did. I think it's about 1972. There was a guy named Todd Faulkner who wrote a feature story for the Los Angeles Times magazine, West magazine. And the article is titled Farewell, My Black Dahlia. And in the precede to that article, it refers to Elizabeth Ann Short. And it came out of nowhere. It was probably confused with another case, something like that. But it stuck. And you used to see it in Wikipedia, not too much anymore. It's in the FBI file. The FBI file has it as Elizabeth Ann Short. I have heard, and there's probably one reason my friendship with James Ellroy ended is because I had the audacity to correct him when we were filming James Ellroy's Feast of Death. He referred to her as Elizabeth Ann Short, and I corrected him as they were filming. So I don't know if I haven't watched the final film in a long, long time. So I don't know if that made the film, but yeah. So that's where Elizabeth Ann came from. All righty. So I got something over on Instagram here. Is it true? Oh, Pinker. Is it true that he pioneered microscopic color autopsy slides? That's a good question. Ray Pinker, of course, was that's a question from Instagram. Pinker was long dead by the time I got around to doing the Black Dahlia case. I did go to his house, I did meet his widow. I sat at his desk. I went through his scrapbooks. Um, Beyond that, I don't know. I don't have any information on that. Anything color would have done by anything involving the autopsy would have been done probably by the coroner's office. I think in the case of the Elizabeth Short autopsy, there was photographs of that, but they were taken by the LAPD photographer Gilbert Lawson. Pro tip: all the LAPD photos in the Black Dahlia case have three things. They have the DR, which is the district reporting number. They have the date, and they have the initials GL. I think some of them are, he wrote his last name, Lawson. But generally, it's either GL or Lawson, and the date and the DR number. As far as that goes, again, Ray Pinker was long gone by the time I was doing my research. I did meet his widow. She was a very nice lady. I sat at his desk. I sat out in his little study. Most of his papers had been donated. I think most of his stuff had been donated to Cal State LA at that point, I think. So there wasn't a lot left there, but it was a very interesting experience just to be there. And coincidentally, they used to raise dahlias, and they lived in a very hilly part of LA called Mount Washington. And she said, yeah, we tried to grow dahlias, and the various mountain critters would eat them. So that's kind of a little sidelight on Ray Pinker. Okay, let us go to one of the submitted questions here. Bassett asked, if the alleged sightings of Elizabeth Short weren't real, could it be possible that she had gone that missing week to a nearby city? Yes, that is indeed possible. We don't know. The only thing we really know for sure is that she never contacted anybody that she knew here in Los Angeles, not Ann Toth, not anybody. And Ann Toth in her interviews said, I would think she would contact me. I helped her a lot. So it is absolutely positively could have been that she was out of town without her stuff. Because remember, all of her luggage was checked at the bus station. So all she had was her purse and the clothes on her back. That was it. But again, that's entirely possible. Okay. Well, let's go back to the chat here. Let's see. I'm wondering if the crime against Elizabeth would have been remembered as well if it had been no Black Dahlia nickname. That's a great observation. That's what Harry Hansen was the lead detective. He said the nickname, the publicity, the nickname was one of the factors. It was terrible. It was a terrible murder. It had the nickname. She was beautiful or pretty or however you want it, and it was unsolved. Because there were other murders in his view. There were other murders that were as terrible, but there wasn't the nickname, and they were not solved, or they were solved, or whatever. But there was never that conjunction of all three factors, and so definitely the nickname, as far as Harry Hansen was concerned, the nickname definitely helped. Let's see. Okay. Christopher has a great question here. Thank you, Christopher. Did Glen Sterns have anything interesting to say about Elizabeth Short? Yes, he did. Who is Glen Sterns? Sorry, Instagram folks. My phone is getting an incoming call. Maybe it's the Butthurt hotline. Anyway, what did Glen Sterns have to say about Elizabeth Short? Who is Glen Sterns? After Elizabeth Short was killed, a guy by the name of Glen Sterns approached them and said, hey, I've got some pictures of Elizabeth Short. And here's the whole backstory. Glen Sterns entered, and his name might not be Glen Sterns. It might be something that sounds like that, but we'll call him Glen. Glen entered Elizabeth Short's life at a critical moment. Here's what was happening with Elizabeth Short's life. Elizabeth Short and her buddy Margie Graham were kicking around Hollywood. They had lived with Mark Hansen, and Mark Hansen threw them out. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short were living with Mark Hansen. He threw them out. He threw them both out. And so they met these two guys on Hollywood Boulevard named Bill Robinson and Marvin Margolis. And they were very bold. Elizabeth Short, usually, if she had a sidekick, she could be pretty bold. She was much more reserved by herself. Margie was kind of took the lead in those things. Anyway, they came up to Marvin Margolis and Bill Robinson and told them their tale of woe. And Bill Robinson said, hey, you know, you ladies can stay with us, as two single men in Hollywood would do. Hey, you're two desperate ladies. You need a place to stay. You can stay with us. And so they did for a couple of weeks. I think that was the Guardian Arms. It's on Hollywood Boulevard. The building is still there. It's funky. But anyway, they really expected the ladies to be romantic. They weren't. And in the interviews in Boxy here, they complain about how they expected Margie Graham and or Elizabeth Short to be romantic with them, since they were providing a place to stay. And it didn't happen. And so after 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, Bill Robinson said, you guys got to go. Bill Robinson, the pretext was Bill Robinson said, my aunt and uncle own this apartment building, and if they found out we had women staying with us, we would be out of here. And you have to remember that after World War II, there was an acute housing shortage. Apartments were really, really at a premium. They were hard to get. And so Bill Robinson says, hey, ladies, time to leave. And at that point, Margie Graham says, I've had it with Los Angeles. I am going back home to mom and dad in Massachusetts. So exit Margie Graham. Not Elizabeth Short. She could have gone home at that point as well. She did not do that. She opted to stay in Los Angeles. So here's Elizabeth Short. Just got thrown out of this place she was staying with Bill Robinson and Marvin Margolis. And she encounters Glen. Glen says, hey, do you want to pose? He's an amateur photographer. He is not a professional photographer at all. It's a hobby with him. He says, hey, do you want to pose for some pictures with me? And she says, okay. Now, I don't know. I don't think he ever told the police whether he paid her to pose for him or not. I don't know that. Anyway, they go to John Marshall High School and take a series of pictures that are now the famous, iconic, last known photographs of Elizabeth Short at John Marshall High School. And they are all over the place. They are colorized. They are, people will, do a then and now where it's like, here she is on the steps, and here I am, and that kind of thing. What happened after he took those pictures was she tells him, hey, I don't have any place to live. And so Glen, being a chivalrous type, says, well, let me see if I can find a place for you to live. And so they get in his car and they drive all over the valley looking for a place for her to stay. They don't find anything. No luck at all. All night, as I believe the story was that they drove around most of the night, came back the next morning to Hollywood, and she says, take me to Mark Hansen. And so he said, okay. She wanted to go back to Mark Hansen's. I took her back to Mark Hansen's. I unloaded all of her luggage. I put it on the porch. And as I was leaving, a woman at Mark Hansen's house had opened the door and was letting Elizabeth Short in. And he said, like everybody else, I never saw her again. That is the typical conclusion of pretty much every story about any encounter with Elizabeth Short, is I never saw her again. That's pretty much how it goes. And so that was his line. After she was killed, after she was identified in the papers, then he came forward voluntarily, contacted the investigators, and turned over the photographs. And that is the story on that. But that is the complete. It's interesting in that it's a typical encounter with Elizabeth Short, where that's relatively brief, maybe a day, something like that, and I never saw her again. That is the typical Elizabeth Short encounter. Let's see here. Go back to the chat here. Is it true that Red Manley was committed to an asylum a few years after the murder and he was there until his death in 1986? Yes and no. Red Manley was mentally unstable anyhow. That is why he had a mental breakdown. That's why he was discharged from the military. He was in the Army. Red Manley never went overseas. He spent most of his time at a remote Army base, Army Air Forces base. I think it was a training base. Anyway, but he was a bandsman. He was a saxophone player, a musician, and the band would play at the base. They would do little gigs in the surrounding area, that kind of thing. He cracked up and was discharged to the VA as a mental case, and so he was already hanging by a thread even before he met Elizabeth Short, even before any of that happened. He had been given a whole bunch of electroshock treatments. Yes, that was in the days when they did that sort of thing. They gave him a lot of electroshock treatment. So he was already, even before he met Elizabeth Short, he was hanging by a thread. What happened is he has his little thing with Elizabeth Short. He brings her back to LA. He leaves her at the Biltmore, and like everybody else, I never saw her again. And then Elizabeth Short is killed. The people that she stayed with down in San Diego, the French family, they remember Bob or Red, and so they get a line on Red Manley, and he's identified, and he's put through the ringer at that point. They give him sodium pentothal, all that kind of thing, and so he subsequently had a crack up. Yes, he was hospitalized at the big mental facility, Patton Hospital, but he did not die there. He was released. He died in Orange County. I forget the year that he died, but it was he did die. He was in Orange County. He was working apparently at the time, but a very sad case. But no, he was committed, but then released. Okay. GB says, I'm obsessed with why Elizabeth Short left Los Angeles for San Diego. Yeah. She told everybody, she told everyone, she told Mark Hansen, she told Ann Toth that she was going to go up to the Bay Area to spend the holidays with her sister, Virginia, and brother-in-law, Adrian West, in Berkeley. She did not do that. She went to San Diego. She explained the story that she gave to Mark Hansen was that she met a screwball and decided to go to San Diego for a few days. My take is that it was fiction from the get-go. She had really no plan of going up to the Bay Area to meet Virginia and Adrian. That was not, because Virginia had no knowledge of that. So I think Elizabeth Short got a ticket down to San Diego, crashed at the movie theater there, and then just by chance ran into Dorothy French, who took her home for a month, and after a month said, "You've been here a month, time to move on." So I think it was improvised. Elizabeth Short kind of improvised a lot of things in her life. Planning was really not her long suit, shall we say. Let's see. Why do you think murder cases get labeled? Is it just sensationalism? Yeah, it's just sensationalism. It sells papers. Yeah, that's all there is. There was no other reason from that. The Herald Express was known for that, and it says something about the nature of the afternoon papers and their audience. The morning news, and of course, you have to understand none of this happens anymore. This is all passé. In the 1940s, you had the morning papers, which were pretty straightforward and pretty serious, and then you had the afternoon papers, and the afternoon papers had a lot more features. They were more geared toward, let's say, housewives living at home, housewives at home, stay at home, and they would be a lot more scandalous, a lot more sensational. They would, and they also they would serialize novels. They would serialize books, stories, that kind of thing. There was a lot of let's see, and the things that kind of an afternoon paper would appeal to. For example, race results, stock market results, that kind of stuff. And so the folks who followed racehorses or followed the stock market, they would buy the afternoon papers. They were generally, what can I say, kind of racy, and dealt a lot more in crime. And so it was perfectly in fitting with that. What can I say? In that sort of market that they would nickname murder cases. That's why they did it. Okay, let's see here. Julia, how did Walter Bailey meet Elizabeth Short? Did he do the evacuation of her body tissue alone? If he was homicidally crazy, how could he control himself so as to not leave a trace? Well, unfortunately, it would make my life a lot easier if we knew that Walter Bailey ever met Elizabeth Short. We don't know that. There is what we do know is that Virginia Short, Elizabeth's older sister, knew the Bailey family. And the Bailey family lived a block away from the crime scene. How do I know that? I have it in writing. Walter Bailey's daughter was matron of honor at Virginia Short's wedding. There's pictures of them together. It's indisputable that the two families knew each other. Barbara Bailey's dad was Walter Bailey. Walter Bailey possibly, I mean, if Virginia Short was ever at the Bailey house, it's conceivable that she met Walter Bailey. We don't know that for sure. Virginia Short died many years ago, so there's really no way to check. But as far as Virginia Short ever meeting, as far as Elizabeth Short ever meeting Walter Bailey, we don't know that. It would make my life so much easier if we could document that. There is nothing. Was he homicidally crazy? What we know about Walter Bailey comes mainly from the probate records, and some anecdotal. I interviewed people who knew him, and he underwent a radical personality shift. So we do know that. Let's see. Okay. From Instagram, the underage Lynn Martin. My understanding is that she was in the papers. She was returned to some sort of institution. Any truth to that? Okay. Lynn Martin shows up in James Ellroy's book. Who is Lynn Martin? Okay. Let's rewind a little bit. Elizabeth Short goes out to Long Beach to see if there's anything going on with Gordon Fickling, if there's any spark left or not. So they come up to Hollywood. They stay at the Hotel Brevoort and exit Gordon Fickling. He's done. And so while Elizabeth Short is in Hollywood, she meets Margie Graham. She knew Margie Graham from a waitressing job back in Massachusetts. So Margie says, hey, you need a place to stay. I'm waitressing. I've got a place with another waitress named Lynn Martin. So the three of them live in this hotel for, we'll say, a month. Again, remember that there's an acute housing shortage in Los Angeles. And after about a month, they're asked to leave. Ladies, adios. And so what happens at that point is, and I should point out that Margie Graham and Lynn Martin both worked as waitresses. Elizabeth Short did not. She had worked as a waitress, but she never worked when she was in Los Angeles. So Margie and Lynn Martin are working as waitresses at this place. Elizabeth Short is not. After about a month, the hotel manager says, you guys got to go. And so they split up at that point. Margie and Elizabeth Short set out together. Lynn Martin goes off on her own. And she turns out to be, when Elizabeth Short is arrested, when Elizabeth Short is killed and identified, then they are looking for Lynn Martin, who's still in LA. She's found at a motel out in Ventura Boulevard. And the detectives are questioning her, and they find out she's an underage runaway from Long Beach. And Lynn Martin isn't her real name. She has a whole bunch of aliases, and she has an arrest record. And so she, as soon as they find out she's a juvenile, the detectives can't interrogate her. She has to be turned over to juvenile authorities. And so she is. She had been at the El Retiro Home for Girls, which many years later is where Cheryl Crane was after she killed Johnny Stompanato. It was a big facility out in the valley for delinquent girls. Beyond that, it's really hard to say what became of Lynn Martin and all of her different aliases. She was underage. I'm not sure what kind of contact she would have had with her family. She was adopted, but was a very problematic kid. I'm not sure her adoptive family wanted her back. So Lynn Martin is one of those question marks where I wish I could tell you. I have spent gobs and gobs and gobs of time trying to find out her story. She is one of the people that just vanished into thin air. I don't know. It would be nice to know what became of her, because I've never been able to find. And I have spent, I can't even tell you how much time I spent looking for information on Lynn Martin. A lot. Let's see. Okay, what I got back over here? James Elroy says you are part of the Cashew Club. I don't give a shit what James Elroy says about me at all. I couldn't care less. I have nothing to say about James Elroy. Nothing good, anyway. He's a lousy friend. He has no idea how to be a friend. I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Carl. Last year, I read a new book on the Cleveland Torso murders case. I know it had no connection to the Black Dahlia case you've discussed in the past, but it struck me as I read that it seems if most of the case files in the Cleveland case are now in archives for researchers to consult, which leads to my question. Why is the LAPD Black Dahlia file so guarded and restricted almost 80 years after the crime? Surely everyone connected to the case in 1947 is long dead. The file has clearly not been managed responsibly over the years, with items apparently going missing. But shouldn't it be transferred over to some historical archive at this point? What does California law say about old case files? Why should it even be a live cold case from the police department's perspective in 2024? I know there's no statute of limitations on homicide cases, but at some point, shouldn't actual reality take over? Okay, no. Let me take a running start at that question. Number one, I have seen the file cabinet. at least when it was at Parker Center. So there is a file cabinet, and it is crammed full of stuff on the Black Dahlia case. To say that things are missing and walked off and has been poorly managed, that's not true. The people who say that are invested in stuff being missing. No, the LAPD is a very careful guardian of that, of the files in the Black Dahlia case. And I have to say, I support that. At this point, I support the LAPD in not giving anybody access to it. If there was, things would indeed walk off. When I was dealing with Boxy, when I was the original Boxy, this is a Boxy clone. When I was dealing with the original Boxy, it was just random papers shoveled into boxes. There was no order to it at all, and very little supervision. It's not like you go into one of these university archives where you have a proctor watching what you're doing. It's like, okay, go down to the break room and dig through the box. And that was pretty much how it was handled. As I said, I support that. What you have to understand, though, is the first question is, has the LAPD been good stewards of the Black Dahlia files? Yes, they have. Steve Hodel likes to say, oh, the evidence is missing. Well, I mean, what is evidence in the mind of Steve Hodel? Well, it's all these crackpot postcards that were written by God knows who. In the world of Steve Hodel are all written by his dad. In reality, no. But what you have to understand beyond that is the mindset of the LAPD. It is a very insular, closed institution. It is the thin blue line. It is we see the evil that you pretend doesn't exist. And I have to add, in having studied the LAPD historically, law enforcement changed in a fundamental way after 9/11. 9/11 really changed law enforcement. At one point in the 40s, which is the period that I'm talking about, newspapers and the police were pretty chummy. They were pretty clubby. There was no police information officer. There was no such thing as a PIO. That didn't come along till quite later. If you wanted to know something, you asked Patrolman so-and-so, you asked Sergeant so-and-so, you asked Detective so-and-so. And that's why you have all these guys in the papers. That you could just go up and talk to them. Not anymore. And at this point, there is such a chasm between the news media or even the outside world and police that it's like, no, hands off. Beyond that, institutionally within the LAPD, and it really, there are, I guess they're called silos, where if you know somebody who works burglary in the West Valley, they don't necessarily know people in robbery homicide. You know, it's very compartmentalized in that way. And so the homicide guys would talk to each other, but the chance of somebody else, even within the LAPD, and I've had LAPD officers tell me, yeah, robbery homicide, RHD, it's its own closed little environment. And so that is sort of the nature of the LAPD. There is, my understanding is that the California legislature gave the LAPD some legal standing that they could withhold files on open cases. They are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. I know, I tried. And casually, I'll say, nobody is getting into the Black Dahlia files as long as Steve Hodel is alive. No one. He's screwed it for everybody. They aren't giving it to him, and they won't give it to anybody else because he could come along and say, hey, what about me? And I will also point out, and this is my final thought on that, Brian Carr, the custodian of the Black Dahlia case, when I was doing my research, said that if Steve Hodel had come to me before he wrote Black Dahlia Venture and asked, hey, can I see my dad's file? I would have showed it to him out of professional courtesy. After the book came out, forget it. And so Steve Hodel has made absolutely sure that nobody is going to get access to the Black Dahlia files as long as he's alive. It ain't happening. Let's see. Eugene, were there any female suspects in the case? Aggie Underwood believed that, right? Elizabeth Short was known to be homophobic. Maybe she said the wrong thing to an angry lesbian. Well, that was one of the scenarios that they came up with, and it's really cringe. They started with a correct observation, which is Elizabeth Short didn't have her luggage. She only had the clothes on her back. She had very little money. How did she survive for a week? And that is right. And so they said, well, maybe she was hanging out with other women. Maybe, and it's like, well, okay, that still kind of makes sense. And they said, well, maybe she was the victim of a lesbian love triangle. And so you read this in the paper and it's like, what are you thinking? Now, we're talking about the 1940s. And so this posed a real problem for the newspapers because you couldn't use words like homosexual and lesbian in the paper at all. And so the newspapers had to kind of turn themselves in knots trying to figure out how could we indicate this without using the L word? How do we do that? And so they use a lot of coded language, which is, in 2024 is pretty amusing. There were women who confessed to the killing Elizabeth Short. There were the false confessions. And some of them were really, really sad sack cases. But in terms of actually, if you go through, it's in here, Frank Jimison's list of suspects. I think one of them is like queer women surgeon, but there's no name attached to any of that stuff. So that was something they looked at, something they wondered about. Beyond that, it was one of many things they looked at. What Aggie Underwood believed is an open question. If you read Aggie Underwood's memoirs, Newspaper Woman, there's some stuff in there that is just flat out wrong. And to me, it raises the question of how much she might have used a ghostwriter or a co-author or something like that, because she's got stuff in there that just that didn't happen. Alrighty, let's see here. Getting close. What have we got? When did M asks, when did Dr. Bailey become a suspect? Not until I stumbled across him. What happened was I had the wedding certificate of Virginia Short and Adrian West. It was a multi-generation photocopy that was sent to me along with a lot of other Dahlia stuff by a guy named Kyle Wood. Kyle Wood was a very big in the early days of the sort of the Black Dahlia community back in the 90s. He got wind, because of course the Black Dahlia community at that point was tiny. He heard that I was doing a story about the Black Dahlia case. And so all on his own, he sent me a box of things. And some of it was very useful. He sent me a copy of the inquest. He sent me some other things. He sent me his home-rolled video, Medford Girl, that he now sells on eBay. And he sent me this multi-generation copy of the marriage certificate of Virginia Short and Adrian West. And I thought, well, that's a weird thing to have, but it didn't seem related, so I just filed it away. And one of my things is I like to visit every location that's involved in the whole Black Dahlia saga. I've been to pretty much everywhere. And so I remember thinking, well, Virginia Short and Adrian West got married in Inglewood. How weird. And so I had some time one summer. I dug out the marriage certificate, and I was going to go down to Inglewood and see where this address was. And then I noticed there was something, but it was multi-generation, so it was hard to make out. So I sent off for a fresh copy, and lo and behold, the name emerged, Barbara Lindgren, and an address on Norton Avenue. And I had been researching Norton Avenue for months at this point. And the reason is that when I did this story for the 50th anniversary, I interviewed John Douglas, the profiler, and he was really the guy who set me on the right track. He asked me a lot of questions about the neighborhood. And at that point, because my research was really new and I really didn't know that much about Norton Avenue or Leimert Park at that point, I said, gee, I don't know. It was just a white middle-class neighborhood. He said, okay. The killer had a reason for picking that neighborhood. And so I spent a lot of time. Man, I went all through the history of Leimert Park, all the way back to when it was a rancho, all the way through the development of Leimert Park. I researched all of that, and I couldn't find anything unusual. There was absolutely nothing unusual about this piece of property at all. So when I got this piece of paper, and I got a fresh copy of it from the state of California, and here's this address on Norton Avenue, it's like, wow. And long story short, I looked up the address. It's a block from the crime scene, and I said, wow, what's that all about? So it was only when I started researching the Bailey family as a result of this marriage certificate that I came across the name Walter Bailey. So he was never a suspect in the 40s. Nobody had ever heard of him. He died a year after Elizabeth Short was killed. He died in early 48. So he was not on anybody's radar at all until I came along. And so that is how Walter Bailey emerged. So now at long last, I am getting down to questions from Malcolm. Malcolm, be patient here. I'm skipping. Let's see. I'm skipping some of these. Did Virginia Short and Adrian West get divorced? In her obituary in the Stockton Record, she is referred to as the loving mother of 2 children, but there is no beloved wife of. Yes. Indeed, Virginia Short and Adrian West did get divorced. And they were both dead by the time I came along in the 90s to do research. And my attitude is to not unduly hassle the Short family. This is a very, very extremely devastating subject for them. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want people to even know that they're attached in any way to the Black Dahlia killing. There were only sisters, and so that when they got married, they changed their last names. Nobody identified their last name as Short. I couldn't interview either Adrian or Virginia. I did contact their kids because there seemed to be this link between their parents, and there did seem to be this link between her parents and the Bailey family, their parents and the Bailey family. I did talk to both of them. And I have to say, Alden West was a great guy. He was very forthcoming with me. He was very, very smart. He was a very smart guy. He graduated from Berkeley. He had a law degree from Berkeley. He was smart. He was a very unusual fellow. I enjoyed him. I didn't get to know him as well as I would have liked. He was up in the Bay Area, and then died way too soon. It's very sad, very, very sad. The daughter, a little bit, but mostly Alden, who was very helpful to me and filled me in on a lot of the impact of the Black Dahlia killing on the Short family. He was a tremendous resource for that. Let's see. Yeah, Elroy's still got a book out. Most Gilmore's lies from Severed have been supplanted by other people's trash books, or do many of his still linger? Oh, yeah. If you go to Wikipedia, Severed and John Gilmore is all over the place, either directly from Severed or sort of laundered through another book. There's this goofy book by a guy named William Rasmussen, who is just sort of gobbled up masses of Severed and regurgitates it. And even I have to say, even John Douglas's Mindhunter, or no, pardon me, John Douglas's Cases That Haunt Us, um, relies way too much on Severed. So there's sort of a fact laundering, and I don't write anything on Wikipedia. I gave up on it long ago, but I like to monitor the Wikipedia articles just to see what what is going on in pop culture, what misinformation is out there now. And even though I am in the article, some at certain points, yeah, it John Gilmore's, especially. I think the biggest lie in from Severed, or one of the big lies, is that she was forced to eat feces, because Steve Hodel is all over that, and of course Steve Hodel, the lying cop, everybody loves to follow him. So that's all over the place. So yeah, these things take on a life of their own and just spread. Let's see. I'm going through alphabetically here. Lots of questions from Malcolm. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, Malcolm. I'm skipping. I'm getting so many good questions. I'm going to have to save some of these for later. Aside from Mary, this is from Spins. Aside from Mary Pacios, is anyone else in particular backed her suspect Orson Welles? No, no. The whole Orson Welles thing went absolutely nowhere. It died a quick death, as it should, and is frequently pointed out as just some of the crackpot solutions. I like Mary Pacios personally. She's still around. She just sent out an email of a grand celebration for her 90th birthday. Good for her. But some of the things she says are just not possible. So no one has ever gone for Orson Welles except for her. Let's see. Was Elizabeth the lady in red who attempted to get the dentist Doc Schwartz to examine her? I don't think so. That is one of the stories somewhere or other. You have the whole. You have to remember. What's important is you have to remember that Elizabeth Short was very modest, and so were all the sisters. That the Phoebe Short ingrained in these daughters to be very, very proper and modest, and they were. Elizabeth Short did not show a lot of flesh. Yeah, there are pictures of her where she's showing some skin in a swimsuit, that kind of thing. There are stories that she liked to sit so her tattoo showed, but the tattoo wasn't really all that far up her leg. She was generally modest. I don't think that story I don't think that story was Elizabeth Short. Okay, Instagram folks, I'm going to get cut off, so I have to say goodbye to you. Okay. Sorry, I learned the hard way that if I don't cut off Instagram after an hour, it just disappears into vapor. Let's see. Stephen asked the question, and I'll wrap it up here. P. Wheatwell argues that the letters like D or an E or an F were scratched into Elizabeth Short's body. Anyone in the DA's files, investigators, coroner, agree to this? What do you think? She even implies a scratched in letter may have been covered up in cross-hatching, mutilation, and it all relates to the killer's ego. Utter BS is my response to that. The person who also came up with that was the sleazy Don Wolfe, author of Black Dahlia Files, who faked a document. Black Dahlia Files faked a document. Poor Boxy. Donald Wolfe went through you and faked stuff. That was the contention of Donald Wolfe, that there was a letter. No, I mean, and you can convince yourself that you've seen things, particularly if your name is Steve Hodel and you see the last name Hodel in every painting and every photograph ever taken. The reality is no. Cross-hatching is cross-hatching. P.U. Wheatwell ignored a lot of what is in here. Poor Boxey. P.U. Wheatwell ignored a lot of what was in Boxey to make her case against Leslie Dillon. And that brings us up to the hour. And I'm going to say thanks, everybody, for showing up. It's been fun. And let's do this again in a month. Okay. Take care, folks.